In my last video, I prepared several textures for this environment, including a wooden panel that I'm going to use for the wainscoting. But rather than just a flat image, I want to add some depth to it to make it a 3D model. This video, I'm going to show how I do that. Okay, I have our panel open in Blender because I'm going to create a 3D model out of this. A 3D model to display the texture. Alright, so I've started out with a quad and I've already created a material and mapped the panel texture onto the material. So right now, I'm going to take my quad and stretch it about to the right size. I'm going to go into edit mode and use the knife tool to just make some cuts where some of these lines are. It's not going to be possible to do it very precisely because the lines are not straight, they're kind of jagged. You can see a little better when I put it in wireframe mode. I'm viewing the normals. It looks like, yeah, here we are. They're all pointing this direction. Okay, so I've selected all these faces around the rim and I'm going to extrude them forward. Pull these forward a little bit. Alright, so you can see I'm adding some depth to the panel. Texture coordinates for the model, that is the way the texture is mapped onto the model, is updated automatically as I edit it. But you'll notice these new faces that it's adding, the texture's just kind of smeared along there. That's because they don't have texture coordinates of their own yet. But we can adjust that later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete the faces from the sides here because we're not going to need those actually, and from the bottom as well. And that's because you're never going to see the edge of the panel. The edge of the panel is always going to be flush with another panel or it's going to be against the wall. Extra polygons take additional time to render. Now this is probably not enough geometry to really worry about, but we might as well delete them since we don't need them. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select each vertex one at a time, and I want to make sure that when you put two panels right next to each other, they're exactly flush. So I'm going to check and make sure that the position along Blender's y-axis is a nice round even number. As long as it says 1 right here, then it's going to join perfectly with the panel next to it. You see this one's off just a little bit, so I'm going to set it back to 1. You wouldn't be able to see the change particularly, but if you put two panels next to each other, there might be a small gap or a slight overlap, and that would not look very good. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is get rid of those smudgy textures on the new faces. First I'm going to select all of the new faces. Now we're going to generate texture coordinates for the selected faces. Texture coordinates tell the renderer what part of the texture to show on which part of the model. And the reason why we have these smudgy faces is because they don't have texture coordinates right now. Now, when I generate the texture coordinates, the faces that I selected are going to be mapped to the texture map, but it's pretty much just random. And they're just kind of placed along here at random with no rhyme or reason really. I'm just going to scale them down to basically nothing and then just move them over to a plain white part of the texture. That way only the plain white will show on those faces. The next video, I will demonstrate how I assemble all of the assets into Unity and create this scene